Hello. So last week I made an H. Emily Cady playlist. I know that a lot of people liked hearing the commentary that I did on that H. Emily Cady essay, and I finally got around to making a playlist of several of the videos and podcast episodes that we've done over the last couple of years about H. Emily Cady. And with that in mind, and after the last car video where I read another excerpt from Invisible Supply by Joel Goldsmith, I finally got around to making a playlist of the Joel Goldsmith stuff that we've, had commentary on and read from over the last couple of years, or really only the last year and a half, because, I've mentioned it before. I got first into Joel Goldsmith back in like 2016, but then I didn't really get back into him until like midway through 2022. So I've been really digging his advice, especially his book Invisible Supply, over the last year and a half. And it's actually probably been the book I've read and pondered and meditated over more than any other manifesting book in that time frame. So we've created a playlist finally of Joel Goldsmith stuff. I'll put the link above and below with the Goldsmith playlist, because he's a very deep and brilliant, spiritual teacher, manifesting teacher. And I think that one thing he often talks about, and H. Emily Cady talks about as well, and that not many other, manifesting or new thought oriented teachers talk about all that often, is this idea of kind of just surrendering to God. And what comes out of doing that. The fulfillment of doing that, the absolute method, as we like to say, in action, right? The golden key of Emmett Fox, in action. This surrender. Goldsmith often quotes that line from Jesus, I of myself can do nothing. The Father works through you. That type of idea, that type of approach. For me, that really is the backbone of my, I guess you could say, manifesting practice. It's the realization that, generally speaking, big picture wise at least, I can do nothing. I surrender my own willpower, like we were discussing last video, over to God. You do what you have to do, you do the best you can do, but you recognize that you yourself are not really doing much of anything. And again, this is something that Goldsmith, as well as H. Emily Cady, really discuss well. And it's why, it's also why more people don't talk about it. Talk about Cady or Goldsmith, these type of teachings on social media. It's just too quiet and too non-self-oriented, really, I think, to be that popular. And don't get me wrong, I really think that someone like Neville was getting at the same thing that these teachers were getting at. But it's rather easy to interpret Neville's advice from a more self-centered perspective. And I'm going to imagine this and get this. And that's all well and good to interpret that way up to a certain point. But I don't think that's really what Neville was saying. And I certainly do not think that's what Joel Goldsmith or H. Emily Cady were saying. When you surrender to God or the moment now, when you do that, and we talk about doing that all the time, particularly on the podcast that I have, we talk about just surrendering to now. When you do that, you find fulfillment in the now, in God. And that joy it's not predicated on anything external happening. It's the joy within, the peace within, God within. You could say your imagination flourishing within, the life-giving principle within. And it's basically something you cannot describe, that you can't conceptualize. And that's why someone like Goldsmith or H.M. Lee Cady used, very mystical sounding language. Like all these spiritually based New Thought teachers, when you get really deep, you can't describe it. And again, this connects it with some of the great, other mystic teachings like Zen teachings, non-dual teachings. And like I said, this is what deeply resonates with me, is just doing that. It's a approach that's not really a technique. It's just being here with now. And now is your salvation.